A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Disturbing things have been happening in the state of New South Wales, where the state government has voted on a bill to expand abortion services. Well, Joshua Rowe is with us. He's the New South Wales and ACT Director for the Australian Christian Lobby. Hey, Joshua, welcome back to 2020.
Thanks, Neil. Always good to be with you.
Joshua, the vote was yesterday. Fill us in on what the New South Wales Parliament, and this is the lower house, what they voted around this abortion bill.
Yeah, so interesting passage for this particular piece of legislation. It was actually introduced in the upper house, which is not the usual pathway. Usually it would go through the Legislative Assembly and then up to the upper house, which is considered the House of Review. And then through into law should it pass both houses. But this one came down, and so last week there was a vote in the Legislative Council, and then yesterday we saw a vote in the Legislative Assembly, and the bill passed on the third read, 65 votes in favour and 20 against.
Okay, 65 votes in favour, 20 against, and as I understand it, it was a conscience vote on both sides around this bill, because both sides wanted to give each MP the opportunity to exercise their conscience. That usually means, yes, there's very controversial things in it. Was that significant, do you think? That it's really, that's a big win, isn't it, for them? 65 to 20, that really means the conscience of New South Wales MPs is pretty pro-abortion, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty important on these issues that there is a conscience vote, and we're an advocacy group, and so one of the things that we're focusing on doing is actually ensuring that every person's accounted for in our lobbying, because everyone will have that individual right to determine their position on the legislation as per their conscience. And it's worth noting that, across both the upper house and the lower house, there were members from both Labor, Liberal, Independent and other minor parties who both voted in favour and against the legislation. Now, there is a little bit of complexity when it comes to looking at votes on these bills, because there are a number of conscience votes taken on both the passage of the legislation through the upper house, so you've got all the MPs who are voting there, and then also in the portion of debate which is called consideration in detail, where they go through and consider the different provisions of the bill and propose amendments, there's also conscience votes on each of those amendments that are proposed. So you've really got to dive in and look at all of the different amendments and all of the different proposals within the legislation, and who has found with their conscience to support some of those and to reject others. And that's something that we look at very carefully, because the legislation that actually passed through the lower house yesterday was a very, very different bill, Neil, to the one that was actually introduced in the Legislative Council last week. And we had a number of wins along the way in getting rid of some pretty extreme provisions.
There's some good news then to report around this bill, because not because it was 65 to 20 the vote, but because there were those amendments that were introduced, because the original bill that got everyone wondering what was going on in New South Wales, the power to force hospitals to perform abortions and requiring medical professionals to refer to other practitioners to perform the abortion. Those were sort of, I think, a couple of the key evils in the original bill. But they went through a process where there was amendments, and some of those things were softened or removed. Or what was it that was amended out of the bill that was eventually voted on?
Quite right. So a number of those were struck out. There was a provision proposed that would have made it so that a clinician who has a conscientious objection would have actually had to enter complicity into the process of abortion through referral, direct referral. So currently, a conscientious objector just has to give a woman a health line which will offer other services. This would have changed it so that they have to locate and find people who provide abortions within their community and give a direct referral. Now, that was struck out of the bill, which was fantastic. That was a win. The other one which you referred to was giving the New South Wales Health Minister statutory powers to be able to require certain institutions or public hospitals. Some of those hospitals are run by faith-based groups to provide abortion services. That was also struck out. And the final thing that was struck out, which was really important as well, was a particular provision that would have reduced transparency in reporting on abortion. And this is important data for accountability, understanding what's going on, why abortions are happening, where they're happening, how many. All of this is important for policy making and for, of course, consideration around best supports for women who are struggling with their pregnancy, especially those who want to carry their pregnancy to term. How can we best support them to ensure they have wraparound supports so that they don't feel under pressure to actually go and access an abortion? So we're really pleased to see those amendments receive broad support from across parties in the upper house. And I had been assured by both a number of senior Labor members in my advocacy and Liberal members that there was largely a lot of concern with those particular proposals from the Greens and that they were going to be struck out. So we were glad that come to fruition.
So were they all struck out, or were there some sinister things that snuck through? Are you aware of, because sometimes when there's lots of amendments, lots of them got struck out, but some of them went through. Were there some things in there that we would still be concerned about?
That's a good question. So there were four main things we were concerned about, and I just mentioned three of them. The bill passed through the upper house down into the lower with one thing left, and that was for nurse practitioners and endorsed midwives to be able to prescribe the abortion pill. So this is a pregnancy-inducing drug that brings about an abortion. Now, they had proposed that the Greens, that is, had proposed that this could be taken up until 22 weeks, which is outrageous and very, very dangerous, obviously for the baby, the unborn child who is going to lose their life, but also for the mother who would not receive, support and medical care when she's sent home with this particular pill to take and induce her pregnancy. Now, that was wound back in the upper house through an amendment to 9 weeks, which is what the current TGA or Therapeutics Goods Administration recommends. And so it passed into the lower house. And our advocacy in the lower houses centred on actually making arguments to those who are sitting on the fence as to why this was still a really, really bad proposal to go through, not least because, the sanctity of life should underpin all good policy making and that we should be doing everything that we can to uphold that fundamental reality within our legislating, but also because there had been recent research that come out just a couple of weeks ago in America, Neil, which indicated that out of about just under 900,000 women who had taken this abortion pill up into 10 weeks, 11% of them, just under 11%, had severe adverse reactions, things like hemorrhaging, sepsis, infection, and just under 5% of them had ended in the emergency room. Now, you're talking about nurse practitioners and endorsed midwives basically being able to prescribe this drug like it's any other pill, and then women in the regions going home and potentially having these severe adverse effects without having any support around them. They might not have emergency services close to them. And so there can be a real danger to their health. And of course, we always consider the loss of that baby's life. So we were still making that argument for a good reason to reject the whole bill. But unfortunately, that portion of the legislation did pass yesterday into law. Okay,
so there is a lament, I think, that some will see there because, as you're saying, while most of those provisions were taken out, nurse midwives are now allowed to prescribe abortion pills in New South Wales up to the 9 weeks gestation. Is that the way that it actually looks? That went through in the New South Wales Parliament yesterday?
That's correct. So nurses and midwives can now prescribe abortion pills up until 9 weeks. There were some proposed amendments by Dr. Joe McGurk, who's the member for Wagga Wagga as to increase the amount of training needed for that process and training nurse practitioners and endorsed midwives in counselling as well, to ensure that women are getting the full support that they need. But unfortunately, those were struck out as well. So that's the final substance of the legislation. There is one silver lining I do want to just add, and that is an amendment did pass in the bill to actually increase the level of reporting and accountability. And so there's got to be now annual reporting on abortion services and any severe or adverse effects that come about from those services being implemented across New South Wales and the use of those services. So this is really important data, not only for accountability and because of public interest, but also ensuring that women who are in a place of crisis, are receiving absolute full support that they need to carry their baby to term, and to ensure that they're not being coerced or pressured or financially pressured into making a decision, which many regret.
When there's voting on an abortion bill like this, it exposes the motives of those elected people that we've put into our parliaments. And there's been a huge reaction around this particular bill because the likes of Dr. Joanna Howe led some very serious protests on the streets and outside of Parliament House in Sydney. Very, very powerful protests, and even attracted former Prime Minister Tony Abbott, who said some pretty significant things. He said that fundamentally, this is back to the original bill. Fundamentally, he said it's designed to force Christian people out of the healthcare system. He said it's designed to force Catholic and other Christian hospitals out of the healthcare system unless they are to sacrifice their principles. So about cancelling faith in our public life. We don't think of abortion as being the ramifications of it being that significant, but has he got a point there? Do you have any sort of comment, Joshua?
Yeah, I think that there is a point to be made there, and I think that point quite precisely is that the levers that the Greens were seeking to pull in order to follow along with their ideological crusade to expand abortion do indeed threaten Christians and people of faith who hold this conviction. But not only people of faith, many people enter the healthcare profession pro-life. They enter it because they want to heal and bring about health, not to take life. And so it's important to recognise the broad nature of this in our society, that this lever of pulling on conscientious objection and reducing people's right to free conscience in this way it's not right. It's not the pathway forward, because indeed some people hold those convictions so closely to their heart, and those beliefs animate the reason they're in the healthcare profession, to the point that if they're asked to compromise them, they have no other choice to leave. And I don't know about you, but me personally as a Christian, if I was asked to be complicit in the process of facilitating a woman to procure an abortion within healthcare, I too would have to leave that particular profession, because I just would not feel comfortable being a part of that. And I think that's the truth for many Christians right across New South Wales, and that's why we fought so hard on that particular provision. And it's also why I was glad that the majority of parliamentarians in the upper house, and indeed in the lower house from across both parties, also shared that position that that was too extreme and that it needed to be removed from the bill. But this is the kind of extreme legislation we continue to see from the Greens party, and they really do need to be called out for it.
And more extreme legislation, no doubt, that we'll talk about in the weeks ahead. And Joshua Rowe, thank you so much for a good account of what has gone on around that dreadful abortion bill in New South Wales. Some of those amendments made, but still there's likely to be a wedge that will be driven in there. And a lot of Christians working in healthcare might not be able to, with their own Christian conscience. And because we're Christians, we say the value of life comes from being created in the image and likeness of God, and therefore it needs to be preserved, not taken away, and that's not our right. But Joshua, thank you so much for your insight. I'll point listeners to the ACL website. No doubt there'll be some more detail and even resource you can use around the issues on being pro-life in these abortion issues, acl.org.au. Joshua Rowe is the New South Wales State Director and Director too for the ACT for the Australian Christian Lobby. Joshua, thanks so much for sharing these thoughts with us today on 2020.
My pleasure. Thanks, Neil.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.